There are punishments that leave no visible marks, but wear down the soul. They're not shouted, announced, or discussed. One day, they just stop calling you, looking at you, including you. And the worst part is, it happens right when you finally start setting boundaries, when you finally say, no more, no. When they can't control you, they punish you in silence, with calculated absences, with a kind of indifference that hurts more than words ever could. It's a soft form of violence, almost invisible, that we often accept without even noticing until it's too late. Today, we're going to call out that manipulation disguised as calm. You'll learn 7 clear signs that someone is trying to punish you for reclaiming your dignity. These aren't guesses or theories, they're real patterns that show up especially when you start living on your own terms. Stay with me until the end, because the final lesson will show you how to step out of that invisibility without begging, without fighting, and without giving up what you worked so hard to rebuild. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. Here, we don't sugarcoat the truth. We speak it with respect and strength, because you deserve to be seen, heard, and respected, no conditions attached. Have you ever felt that someone's silence hurt more than their yelling? Not because of what they say, but because of what they choose not to say. Not because of what they do, but because they vanish the moment you stand your ground. That silence isn't forgetfulness. It's not exhaustion. It's punishment. You're at the first point in this video, and here we're going to talk about one of the most subtle and cruel ways people try to break you from the inside. When you stop obeying, silence becomes their favorite weapon. There are people who, once they realize they no longer have power over you, don't argue, don't complain, don't confront. They just pull away. They take away their words, their gestures, their attention. It's their way of saying, if you don't do what I want, then you don't exist. And they do it with chilling precision, right after you've said no, right when you start drawing boundaries. Instead of respecting your decision, they punish you with distance. This kind of silent punishment doesn't come all at once. It seeps in like dampness. At first, you barely notice it. An unanswered message, a cancelled visit, a call that never comes. And you, out of love, make excuses. They must be busy. They're probably upset, it'll pass. But it doesn't pass, because it's not a bad day. It's a strategy. And the worst part is, it often comes from the people you love most. Children, siblings, even lifelong friends. People who once seemed unconditional, but now use their absence as a form of control. They don't yell, but they make you feel like you did something wrong. They say nothing, but force you to wonder if you were too harsh, if maybe you should have stayed quiet, if setting that boundary was worth it. Let me tell you something that happened a few years ago. A woman wrote to me from New York. Her name is Teresa. She's 73. She said, Gabriel, after years of feeling used by my daughter, I told her I couldn't take care of the grandkids every day anymore, that I needed time for myself. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse her. I just spoke from the heart. Since then, she stopped calling me. Teresa didn't understand what she had done wrong, but she hadn't done anything wrong. She had done something brave. She started saying yes to herself. This kind of silent punishment is especially devastating in old age, because it doesn't just hurt. It makes you question your right to live with dignity. It makes you feel like being loved means giving in, that if you don't obey, you don't deserve companionship. And that message, even if never spoken out loud, is something many women have carried for decades. But this is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Peace comes when you stop worrying about what you can't control." You can't control if someone pulls away because you started respecting yourself. But you can control what you do with that silence. You can choose not to beg for presence, not to plead for affection. You can use that space to grow stronger, to reconnect with yourself, to stop living based on who rewards or punishes you for their own comfort. Don't get confused. Someone who walks away when you begin to take care of yourself isn't showing disappointment. They're showing their true intention that you remain useful, not free. But you weren't born to be functional. You were born to be whole. To choose with clarity, to love with boundaries, to live without fear of being unseen. So when silence shows up, don't go silent too. Don't quiet your desire to live authentically. That absence doesn't define you. It frees you. It shows you who was really there for you and who was only there for what you gave. And if it hurts, because of course it hurts, remember this: even Jesus was denied by those he loved. He was betrayed in silence, not with shouting, but with lukewarm gestures. And still, he kept walking his path with strength. He didn't wait for apologies. He didn't change his truth. He simply kept going. Do the same, because your path, now more than ever, deserves to be walked without fear of losing those who don't know how to love you unconditionally. Sometimes, silence doesn't come alone. It comes with an invisible retreat, a quiet step back that isn't announced, but is felt in every gesture, every absence, every favor that never comes. It's their way of reminding you, without saying it, that your worth was in what you did, not in who you are. If you're no longer doing what they expect, then you no longer deserve their attention. They stop helping you, so you'll feel like you need them. It's a pattern that repeats with unsettling precision. As long as you stay agreeable, as long as you say yes without question, there are signs of affection, phone calls, support. But the moment you begin to decide for yourself, the moment you dare to say, "I can't anymore, I don't want to," or simply, "Today, I need to think about me," the balance shifts. Suddenly, what used to be support turns into distance. The calls grow cold, the favors disappear, and closeness becomes a kind of hidden punishment. This isn't always driven by conscious malice. Sometimes it's an automatic reaction from people who are used to always having you available. They're uncomfortable with your change. Your autonomy unsettles them. And since they don't know how to deal with it, they choose to leave you alone until, supposedly, you get over it. They don't say it, but they feel it. If she's not going to do what I want, then I won't do anything for her. It's a primitive kind of punishment. An emotional game that in childhood looks like a tantrum, but in adulthood becomes silent manipulation. This is where deep reflection from Stoicism comes in. Epictetus said, "We are not slaves to what happens to us, but to how we respond to it." You can't stop someone from withdrawing their help, but you can stop that withdrawal from becoming a chain that binds you again. Because the danger isn't in the lack of help, it's in what that absence starts to build inside you. Doubt, guilt, the feeling that maybe you were too firm, too clear. You start to think maybe you should have kept quiet, maybe you shouldn't have asked for respect. Maybe it's just easier to go back to saying yes. And that's where the real damage begins. Because they don't just isolate you, they make you question your right to be autonomous. They teach you, without words, that if you don't yield, you'll be alone. That if you assert yourself, you'll be abandoned. And just like that, without ever raising their voice, they get something worse. They get you to betray yourself to regain that so-called affection. Many older women go through this in silence. They see it as the price for keeping their children close, for avoiding conflict with relatives, for not being labeled as difficult. But every time you give in out of fear of losing help, you're paying with your dignity. You're accepting that your well-being depends on someone else's will, and you know that's not living. That's negotiating your essence. From a spiritual perspective, this also carries a deeper truth. God didn't create you to be useful. He created you to be whole. You weren't born to endlessly serve those you raised or cared for. You came here to live with purpose, with freedom, with love that doesn't demand submission. Love given with conditions isn't love. It's a contract. And you are not an emotional employee. You're a woman with a story, with wounds, with strength, with the right to choose. When someone stops helping you because they can't control you anymore, they're not punishing you. They're revealing themselves. They're showing that their support was about convenience, not generosity. And even though it hurts, that revelation can be a blessing because it forces you to see clearly, and clarity, even when painful, is the first step toward emotional freedom. So if today you feel like someone has stepped away because you finally started showing up for yourself, don't grieve it. Be grateful for the clarity. Don't kneel to win back help that only existed under conditions. Keep walking. Build your life with what you have. And every time you achieve something on your own, no matter how small, remember this: you are not alone, you are on your own side. And that is the first and most important act of self-love. The most dangerous part of someone withdrawing their help is that over time, you might start believing you deserve it, not because of what you did, but simply for daring to live with dignity. But that thought doesn't come out of nowhere. It's planted, nurtured, fed. Through glances, subtle comments, judgment-laced phrases, and before you even realize it, you're no longer doubting them. You're doubting yourself. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things begin to shift. They make you feel guilty for having boundaries. This might be the most effective tactic for keeping you under control without ever raising their voice. They don't need to directly demand anything from you. All it takes is for you to feel that by saying no, you've done something wrong. That by protecting your time, your energy, your peace, you've become selfish. And that guilt becomes a key, one that unlocks the door back to submission. Because from that corner of doubt, you start giving in again, pleasing again, silencing yourself again. This is where we need to break the pattern. Stoicism reminds us that no emotion should govern our will. Seneca said the wise act according to reason, not guilt. And you need to reason every time that old inner voice says, "You shouldn't have said that. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe you were too harsh." Ask yourself, where did that decision come from? Was it from impulse or from self-respect? If it came from respect, then there's no valid guilt, only clarity. There's a strategy you can start using today, simple but powerful. When someone reacts with coldness, distance, or irritation because you set a boundary, don't explain yourself. Don't justify, just observe. Your silence in that moment isn't weakness, it's protection. If someone needs a softer version of you to feel comfortable, they're not looking for connection. They're looking for an emotional servant, and you weren't born for that. Picture a door that's always been open. Everyone comes and goes without asking. They leave behind their mess, their complaints, their demands. One day, you decide to install a lock. You're not banning anyone. You're simply choosing who gets to enter and under what conditions. But of course, those who are used to barging in get upset. Now I have to ask, what's wrong with you? You're not the same. They're not angry about the boundary. They're angry because now they have to respect you. And here's where the biggest shift happens. Because every time you hold a boundary without guilt, you're retraining your environment. You're telling them, without saying a word, that your peace is not for sale, that your love is not weakness, that your presence cannot be bought with fear. And most importantly, you're retraining yourself. You're learning to trust your voice again, your judgment, your worth. If this message is resonating with you and you feel like these reflections are putting into words something you've been silent about for a long time, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That helps me keep building this space of clarity and respect that we all need. Tell me in the comments what country you're listening from and write the phrase, "I don't apologize for respecting myself." That way, I'll know you're walking this path of inner reconstruction. There are still important lessons to come, and the last one might completely change the way you understand loneliness, family, and the power you still carry within. Stay with me. This is just the beginning. Holding a boundary without guilt is already an act of transformation. But as brave as that act may be, it isn't always met with respect. Some people, unable to accept it, fall back on an old strategy, magnifying your mistakes and minimizing their own. Not because they seek justice, but because they need a reason to reject this new version of you. And if you're not careful, you can fall into a dangerous trap, starting to believe you deserve less because you made a mistake once. This brings us to the fourth point in this video, titled, "They exaggerate your mistakes and downplay their wrongs." It's a mechanism as old as guilt itself. It kicks in when you assert yourself, when you claim your space, when you dare to live without asking for permission. Suddenly, everything you did wrong becomes huge, unforgettable, unforgivable. Meanwhile, the things others did, the times they yelled at you, ignored you, manipulated you, are erased, downplayed, or outright denied. It's an emotional distortion designed to do one thing: make you doubt yourself again. This mental trap works because it digs into a wound many older women have carried for decades, the feeling of being responsible for everything. Single mothers, silenced wives, daughters who bore more than their share. That deep-seated belief that they must always be the strong one, the one who holds it all together, the one who never breaks. When they do fail, even once, it feels like the whole foundation crumbles, and those around them know it, even if they don't say it. That's why, when these women start to free themselves, some people go digging into the past to remind them of everything they did wrong, as if a lifetime's worth could be reduced to a list of flaws. The problem is that this mechanism doesn't just hurt, it paralyzes, because while you're trying to grow, to heal, to rediscover yourself, others are dragging you backward with selective storytelling. They do it with phrases disguised as concern. Did you already forget what happened? And what did you do to cause that? You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. And you, already tired from battling your own doubts, might start to give in. Not because they're right, but because you're exhausted from having to explain yourself. This is where Stoicism offers us a vital tool. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul is damaged when it lets others define its judgment. And that judgment, your ability to decide who you are and what you're worth, cannot be placed in the hands of people who only see your shadow and never your light. Acknowledging your mistakes doesn't mean giving up your dignity. You may have failed. Everyone has. But that doesn't invalidate your current decisions or force you to live under the blackmail of the past. The big mistake is believing that to deserve respect, you must be perfect. You're not. No one is. But there's a difference between failing and allowing others to use those failures as an excuse to disrespect you. That's the line you need to draw today, because if you let others define you by what you got wrong, you'll always be begging for approval. But if you choose to remember all the good you've done, that you raised, cared, supported, held people up, then you begin to step out of that corner of guilt others want to keep you in. Take a moment to think about this. How many times have you downplayed your accomplishments out of fear that someone would bring up your mistakes? How many times have you apologized for things that weren't even your fault? That guilt isn't yours. It's a structure others need to maintain so they don't have to confront their own lack of accountability. But you weren't born to carry other people's guilt. You came to learn, to fall, to rise, and to keep walking with dignity. And that's exactly what you'll do, even if some people don't like it. Because your story is not the sum of your mistakes. Your story, if you choose to write it from today forward, is defined by the courage to stop living under the judgment of those who only see what suits them. Respect isn't lost in a single argument. It fades in the small gestures, in the details others miss, but you feel deeply. And one of those gestures, maybe the most painful, is exclusion. Not through harsh words or slammed doors. They slowly leave you out until one day you realize they no longer include you, even in the simplest things. You're at the 5th point of this video, and here we're going to talk about something that cuts deep. They exclude you from decisions to punish you with irrelevance. When someone stops asking for your input, stops seeking your opinion, stops including you in things you once shared, it's not a coincidence. It's a sophisticated form of punishment. They don't have to yell or openly blame you. They just turn you into background noise, like a decoration that no longer gets a voice. And you, who once were the center of their lives, become a silent spectator to decisions that directly affect you. They move to a new city without telling you. They plan family gatherings and leave you out. They make financial, medical, or personal decisions that involve you, but without including you. It's not forgetfulness, it's a message. This pattern builds gradually. It starts when you choose to step away from what no longer nourishes you. When you say, "I can't today," "I'm not doing this anymore," "I need you to respect me." Instead of hearing you, they punish you with irrelevance, as if speaking your truth makes you disposable. And if you're not grounded within, you might fall into the trap of believing you're no longer needed, that you're in the way, that the only way to be seen again is to start giving in again. But that only feeds the cycle. The more you yield out of fear of being left out, the more powerless you become. The easier it is to keep excluding you because your presence loses strength and becomes submission. And submission in later life doesn't bring respect. It brings pity or indifference. Sustained exclusion doesn't just damage your self-esteem. It wears down your emotional health, your daily motivation, your relationship with yourself. You start questioning your judgment, your ability to make decisions. And that's dangerous, because a woman who doubts her worth becomes fertile ground for all kinds of manipulation, from children who take control of her finances to doctors who don't bother explaining her treatment. You're not just left out of family decisions, you're being shut out of your own life, and that cannot be allowed. Breaking this pattern isn't easy, but it's possible, and it doesn't start by demanding a seat at someone else's table. It starts by claiming your place within yourself. If you don't give yourself space in your own mind, no one else will. The question isn't, "Why don't they call me?" The real question is, why am I still waiting to be called when I already have a voice of my own? This isn't about fighting for recognition, it's about acting with integrity, about deciding, suggesting, expressing. And if they don't listen, then it's time to create your own spaces. Spaces where your words carry weight, where your presence doesn't depend on anyone else's comfort. Stoicism teaches us that respect from others is not something to beg for, it's something you embody. Seneca said, "Dignity is neither inherited nor begged for, it's cultivated through daily actions." And you're at a stage in life where you can no longer afford to wait for invitations to exist. If they leave you out, don't shrink yourself. Don't beg. Take up your space with calm strength. From there, some will come closer, others will drift away. But you'll know you're living according to your truth, not to the need for validation from those who didn't value your presence when you gave it freely. Because at this stage, more than ever, the respect others won't give you is the one you must give yourself. Even if it hurts, even if it leaves you alone for a while. Because chosen solitude is far more dignified than company that only shows up when you surrender. When someone cuts you out of their life without explanations, without goodbyes, without even acknowledging your existence, something breaks. And it's not just the bond, it's your sense of place in the world. Because if you're not careful, That gesture plants a dark seed inside you, whispering that maybe you don't matter anymore, that maybe you're not worthy of being seen, heard, or considered. And that's dangerous because once you start believing it, you disconnect from yourself. You stop expressing what you feel, stop asking for what you need, stop living with the strength you still carry. We've reached the 6th point of this video, and here we face an uncomfortable truth. They watch you, but they don't walk with you. Yes, they're around, but their presence is empty. They see you move, but don't get involved. They know how you're doing, but never ask. They hear your words, but never respond with their soul. It's the most modern form of abandonment, surveillance disguised as closeness. You're there, but not really, because they don't truly see you. They're not disturbed by what you feel, only by the fact that you dare to express it. Pause for a moment and picture this scene. It's an ordinary day at home. You've made your coffee, as always. It's quiet, like most days. There are people nearby. Maybe a son who lives with you, a grandchild passing through, maybe a partner who shares your roof, but not your words. You glance at your reflection in the window and ask yourself a question you're afraid to answer. Am I truly accompanied, or just being watched? That difference changes everything, because being accompanied means someone sees your soul. Being watched, on the other hand, is like being behind glass, present but untouchable, seen but not felt. They treat you like you're there, but they don't count on you. And that contradiction slowly dims your light from within. Living in that environment without naming it, without confronting it, leads straight to emotional numbness. You get used to the silence, to the lack of response, to the disconnect, and you justify it. At least they're here. But they're not. Not really. What's present is physical, not emotional, and that hidden absence leaves you lonelier than full isolation ever could, because you can't demand what you supposedly already have. But deep down, you know it's not there. You feel it every time you speak and no one answers, every time you give affection and there's no echo, every time you fight to hold together a bond that only you are carrying. This is where many women quietly break. They start to believe that this is just how life is after a certain age. Resign, stay silent, accept crumbs of attention as if they were gestures of love. But they're not. They're tactics of control, ways of making you doubt your right to demand real presence. Because someone who truly walks with you doesn't just stick around, they get involved, they ask, they listen, they validate you without needing to be asked. And you deserve that. Not because you earned it through sacrifice, but because your existence alone is enough to deserve respect, attention, and soulful companionship. Stoicism teaches us we can't control how others show up, but we can choose what we accept as true companionship. You can keep accepting an empty presence, yes, but then don't be surprised when loneliness drowns you, even while you're surrounded. Or you can, starting today, begin building real connections, even if that means stepping away from those who only watch without truly seeing you. Because pretending you're being accompanied when you're actually being monitored is betraying yourself a little more every day. And if this sounds like a mirror reflecting your life, don't blame yourself. You didn't end up here out of weakness. You ended up here because you gave everything, and no one ever taught you that you had a right to receive in return. But now you know. And once you know, you can't unknow it, because ignoring it is abandoning yourself in the most courageous stretch of your life. And you're not here to give up. You're here to wake up, even if it hurts, even if it shakes everything up, because you are still alive. And as long as you're alive, you deserve to be seen with eyes that recognize your soul, not just your usefulness. After talking about disguised loneliness, about that emotional surveillance that looks like companionship, but is really just absence in disguise, there's only one truth left to face, and it's not a comfortable one, because it's no longer about what others do, or what they take from you, or how they manipulate you. It's about you. about how you've allowed, upheld, or normalized dynamics that have made you invisible, even to yourself. This is where the seventh point of this video comes in. When they can no longer mold you, they try to make you feel invisible. This is the final and most brutal form of control, because it doesn't try to convince you, it tries to erase you. They don't argue anymore. They don't try to change you. They simply act like you're not there, as if your presence doesn't matter, as if your voice makes no difference. And the hardest part is that, over time, you start to believe it. Not because you lack worth, but because the people around you have skillfully planted the idea that your value lies in being useful, in serving, in caring, in yielding. And now that you no longer adapt, no longer fit their mold, you begin to disappear. But you don't disappear all at once. It's more cruel than that. You fade slowly, in gestures, in silence, in decisions where you're no longer included, in conversations where your name never comes up, in routines where no one asks how you're doing. And the world keeps turning, but you're no longer part of it. And if you're not awake, if you're not paying attention, you could spend the next few years convincing yourself that this is how it's supposed to be. That this is what aging looks like. Staying quiet, stepping aside, fading into the background. But it's not. That's a social, cultural, and emotional lie, one that only serves those who benefit from your submission. And now you have to choose, because this isn't just a diagnosis. It's a wake-up call, a warning, an opportunity. You can keep making excuses for others, saying they don't realize that they have their own problems, that you don't want to be a burden. You can keep waiting for acknowledgement that never comes, or you can finally take responsibility for your own visibility, not so others can see you, but so you can see yourself, so you can reclaim your place at the center of your own life. Because as long as you keep waiting for permission, you'll keep living as the shadow of who you could be. I know it's hard. After decades of putting others first, stepping forward feels like selfishness. But it's not. It's justice. And I'm not talking about dramatic gestures or overnight changes. I'm talking about small, daily choices that give you your power back. Saying what you think, even if it's not well received. Choosing what feels good, even if others don't understand. Being where you feel alive, even if it unsettles those who'd rather see you quiet. That's the change that matters. And that change starts today. Because if after everything you've heard, you still think your value depends on the approval of those who punish you with silence, then you don't need more words. You need to wake up, not to please others, but to reclaim your place. Because no one is going to hand it back to you. Only you can do that. And the time is now, not tomorrow. Not when someone finally notices you, now. Because as long as you keep seeing yourself, no one can make you disappear. You didn't make it this far out of curiosity or for entertainment. You made it because you recognized something in these words, something you've been feeling for a long time, but no one dared to name. Because deep down, even if you hadn't said it out loud yet, you knew they were punishing you in silence, manipulating you with absence, with guilt, with indifference disguised as maturity. And recognizing that isn't easy. It's not easy now, and it won't be tomorrow. But it's necessary. Because you can't keep allowing yourself to be erased while you're still alive. You can't keep giving away your dignity just to preserve relationships that no longer respect who you are today. What you've heard in this video isn't advice. These are truths, and truths aren't handed out. They're faced. That's why, if you're still here at the end, I see you. Because not everyone makes it. Many choose to click away when the truth gets uncomfortable, when the words sting, when the mirror reflects something they no longer want to see. But you didn't walk away. You stayed. And that says more about you than any motivational speech ever could. because only someone truly ready to live with clarity can endure the discomfort of waking up. If you felt this video spoke for you, leave a comment with your country and write the phrase, "I don't accept being invisible." That way, I'll know you're part of this group of women who refuse to stay silent, who no longer wait for permission to exist, who no longer trade their self-respect for anyone's comfort. My name is Gabriel, and this is The Stoic Garden. This channel doesn't exist to entertain you or to tell you what you want to hear. It exists to tell you what you need to hear, especially when everyone else chooses silence. Because you deserve to live these years with strength, with clarity, with purpose. And if you ever forgot that, today is the time to remember. Subscribe if you haven't already. Not to be another number, but to be part of a community that's chosen to wake up. Share this video with someone who needs to open their eyes, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it hurts, even if they say you're being dramatic. Sometimes hearing the truth at the right time is the difference between giving up and being reborn. And if you want to keep walking this path of rebuilding, watch one of the videos that will appear on screen. Don't let this conversation end here, because now that you've begun to see yourself clearly, the next step is to act with courage. I'll see you there. Your voice still has a place in this garden. In